Today, there's 19 EDR solution that's IGP and ICLAB approved, all right? And I do not think the market can support 19 solution. So there's also, to some degree, sort of a analysis paralysis for many people.
If I stay to on the legal side, one thing which is really important and I would like to stress because I don't think it has been yet fully broadcasted to a broader audience.
Isn't the goal to make networks or organizations like GSBN almost redundant?
Inherently in this industry, it's all about keeping some information away from your suppliers, right? I want to know something, but I don't want them to know, because my value adds as a middleman is to control that information.
Welcome to Trade Treasury Payments, the podcast unlocking the future of cross-border finance.
From transaction banking and money movements
to liquidity, treasury, and cash management.
We bring you expert insights and the latest trends shaping global finance. Hello and welcome back, and Happy New Year to those that have celebrated and also to those that are preparing for the Lunar New Year in just a couple of weeks' time. Now, just a month into 2026, what a month it's been already. And today we're talking about my favorite topic with some of my favorite people, and I've got some paper here. I'm scrunching it up because that's what we're trying to get rid of in this industry. There are 28 billion pieces or so that are printed and flown around the world each day in global trade, from warehouse receipts, promissory notes, bills of lading, purchase orders, seaway bills, and many, many more. And joining us today, we have two advocates for scrunching up and getting rid of the paper. First of all, legend and CEO of the Global Shipping Business Network and host of the Shelling podcast. And we're actually doing a takeover today with the Shelling podcast, so delighted for that. GSBN claims it's a neutral, non-for-profit, industry-led consortium and digital infrastructure platform that aims to modernize and simplify global trade by enabling paperless, secure exchange of shipping and trade data. So delighted, Bertrand Chen, welcome to TTP. And we also have Luca Castellani, formerly legal officer at the Secretariat of the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, or UNCITRAL, and father of our favorite daughter in the industry, MLETR. That is not a daughter, strictly speaking, but father of the model law of the electronic transferable model law and electronic transferable records. And Luca is author of the newly published UNCITRAL Model Laws on Digital Trade, Electronic Transferable Records, Digital Identity and Trust Services, and also member of the Trade Treasury Payments Global Advisory Panel. And if you listen closely to our last interview with Luca in Vienna last year, you'll know the T on his penchant for a Hello Kitty pin badge. Luca, Bertrand, welcome to TTP.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with a quick quiz. Let's shake things up. So 4 questions, 2 for each of you. No breaks and pauses allowed. Luca, favorite city in the world?
I was young there. My favorite city in the world, well, was many, but the one where I left my heart and I wish I could go back to is Asmara, the capital of Eritrea.
Lovely. What's so good about Asmara?
Oh, it has the best weather in the world. It has the best food, really, a mix of local and Italian influence. The best people, and as I said, it was the first time I was teaching in the university, so my students are dear to my heart, and I come across them from time to time.
Lovely, definitely one for me to visit. Bertrand, what's your favorite movie and why?
My favorite movie is Brazil with Terry Gilliam. So it's an old movie from 1980s. The reason I love this movie is it has probably the funniest depiction of a bureaucracy, where you are closing the room doing something that's really stupid for end of time. And I think that's also a bit relevant to what we're trying to do. So people don't do stupid things because of bureaucratic reason.
There we go. Thank you very much. Luca, most absurd trades law.
The difficult ones are the ones that transpose one-to-one the paper business process. And one that has really caught my attention is the one that says that the transmission of documents in electronic form is a subject the same office hours as if it were on paper. And you have some countries with case law that says no matter that you're sending an email, it got to be received before 5 p.m. As if, after that. And I've seen that. And, I said, yeah, please no. I mean, yeah.
Does it include lunch breaks?
Of course, I guess so.
Sounds like a French law.
It's not.
Bertrand, I guess moving on with the same theme, what's your favorite trade document?
So I have to say, my favorite document is Bill of Lading, because I actually didn't know how important it is, and it's fascinating. So how for 500 years he served, no, more than 500 years, like he served such an important purpose. And now thinking of how to change it to electronic format, I think that's fascinating. And it's probably the most interesting trade document, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and definitely the trade document that we've probably been reporting at TTP, at least in 2025. So let's start with the problem statement, and actually, rather than just the problem itself, Luca, we've come quite a long way from just conversation to actual trade digitalization over the past decade or so. Luca, where have you seen the most progress? Where is the most work still needed to be done?
That's the opportunity statement you wanted to say, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We are starting 2026 in the Model Law and Electronic Transferable Records, and as you said, I was the secretary of the working group that drafted it, was adopted in July 2017. So if you look back at the last 10 years ago, this was in the works, but we didn't have it. So from a legal perspective, we made a lot of progress, not only because we drafted it, but because it came at the right time, as always by coincidence. Most things in the legal world happen not by design, but by coincidence. They came at the right time because the pandemic showed the limits of existing business processes. And so that started focusing policy makers on this issue, and eventually, with the G7 endorsement twice and so on and so forth, the policy change or attention paved the way to adoption in important jurisdictions, Singapore, France, I would say especially UK, with others now coming up, of course, important ones. And let's not forget also the very recent the incorporation of the model law in the Chinese Maritime Code. So now we are talking, of course, the trend is clear. I think there were a couple of other incredibly useful developments, and of course, Bertrand is in a much better position to discuss them. The attitude of the private sector, so a lot of support by ICCDSI, the development of a checklist for assessment or self-assessment of the reliability of the method, the positive attitude and support from the international group of the P&I clubs, which really opened. So, I mean, all of these things are incredible. And also the fact that service providers realized that the old-fashioned model that they were trying to implement for many years was not had no appeal for the users, and so now they're operating in a manner which is more interoperable, and with opens the door to collaboration. If I stay on the legal side, one thing which is really important and I would like to stress because I don't think it has been yet fully broadcasted to a broader audience, is that now UNCITRAL, but also we welcome everybody else active in the space of uniform commercial law, is using MLETR as the standard for all new text. So the model on warehouse receipts done with the UNIDROIT, it 100%. The new Convention on Negotiable Cargo Documents adopted by the United Nations in December, again, it is 100% MLETR, which means basically that all the solutions that are now MLETR compliant are also compliant with new text treaties or model laws, and that those documents may be issued in the same place, which just saves a lot of time and money. So I think this is really important.
Thanks, Luca. So the legal infrastructure is there. Adoption has been sluggish, and I probably think it's fair to say problematic. But Bertrand, you're nodding your head, so let's discuss that. I mean, Bertrand, first of all, GSBN as a neutral consortium does connect up the shipping lines, the operators, the banks, standard bodies, the technology players to kind of collaborate. Where are you seeing paper still acting as a brake on what should otherwise be digital processes? And can you also, I guess to start with, just talk a little bit about the objective of GSBN?
Sure. So maybe first, GSBN stands for Global Shipping Businesses Network. So we are set up as a blockchain consortium. We're headquartered in Hong Kong, and we have been in existence for almost 5 years. So we went through many cycles on blockchain. So at one point, blockchain was very hot, then it was dead. Now it's back to be hot. So we are survived a couple of cycles. So quite happy to do that. But I will say also quite lucky, because we stumbled upon the bill of lading as a document to work on, and that's probably the product or the project on which we have the most momentum right now. And the idea really is, if we can use blockchain to digitize the bill of lading, it will solve a lot of problems that in the past actually plagued the adoption from a technology perspective. But as Luca said, right, from a legal perspective, a lot of change has happened. Unfortunately, on the shipping logistics side, still paper is still dominant for bill of lading, right? So at the beginning, I was very bullish on electronic bill of lading, but the adoption rate is not as high as I would like, even if you have many good action momentum in that direction, such as the container shipping line of DCSA committing to adopt EPL by 2030. So we're at 2026, so I guess it's 4 years, but they should probably not wait for 2029 to start to work on the adoption. And I think, unfortunately, we haven't seen as much adoption from the container carrier yet. That being said, it's a very uneven adoption. So some of the container carrier we see even north of like 30% adoption in some jurisdiction, let's say China. But in other jurisdictions, the adoption is still not very high. And I think the reason for that is it's actually quite difficult to convince people to change. The change management is actually extremely difficult. There was a golden era to push for digitization, and that was during COVID when it was locked down, because if you lock down, you cannot do anything. But and again, I'm not suggesting that we should go back to lockdown to push for adoption of electronic bill of lading. But if you don't have this major, let's say, incentive, it's actually quite hard to change people's mind. They say, I'm used to use paper. Paper works fine. Why do I need to switch to electronic bill of lading? And I think that's a fundamental challenge that still persists. The other thing, I'm going to say something slightly contrarian also, right? Today, there's 19 EBL solution that's IGP and ICLAB approved. Right, and I do not think the market can support 19 solution. So there's also, to some degree, sort of a analysis paralysis for many people who all hear that you need to adopt electronic bill of lading, but the question is which one, in what scenario, and I think that's also potentially counterintuitively another reason why adoption may not be as fast as we like, because a lot of people want to analyze and compare the solution, the difference, which one is for this industry, this different geography, how does it work with the banks, how they work with the so there's more complication to some degree. So to that, I think in my mind, the best progress that we've had over the last, let's say, 12 months is interoperability. I think Luca mentioned that at the beginning, right? Which is if you don't know what to choose, right? If you're afraid to make a mistake, you just need to choose one solution. Just adopt one solution. And as long as they can interoperate with other solution, then you don't have to worry you're locked down to the wrong solution. I think that's probably the biggest unlock. So very happy to report that we managed to do one last year in December. We announced it just now in January with a customer called Lenzing, so from a trade from Thailand to China, and two banks that supported us. One is HSBC, the trade bank, right? So it's not a small bank, it's the trade bank who I would say is both a leader but also sometimes quite conservative in their approach, right? If they're okay with this, you can pretty much say that most of the banks should be okay with this. And there's another bank in China called CZ Bank. And then the two solution provider in this situation is ICE Cargo Docs, and the other one was IQXCBL. But just to be made, it doesn't mean it has to be these two solutions, right? Any solution that's willing to interoperate, as Luca was saying earlier, who understand that it's about growing the pie bigger and not try to monopolize a small pie, we can make it work. And then the solution that we have to do this is basically to both transfer clearly the risk and the liability such that if you use one solution, you do not have to sign the rulebook of another solution. So you can remain with the solution that you choose, that your lawyer, your IT department approved, and you don't have to worry about all the other solutions that exist, the 18 other solutions that you have to adopt them. So I think that's a massive unlock. And I think that's one reason I'm quite bullish that we hopefully has removed this roadblock and will go faster and faster and see more adoption.
Thanks, Bertrand. And we'll talk about interoperability and that pilot very shortly. Luca, Bertrand identified, I guess, three challenges. The inability to provide a decent enough incentive, the change management problem, and frankly, lack of awareness / understanding, or as Bertrand said, analysis paralysis of those 19 different solutions, which perhaps traps decision makers in making a decision. What do you see as the most difficult problem out of those three, and how would you say the industry are trying to address that particular problem to, I guess, unblock or remove the paper?
Out of the three, I mean, the third one is not even a problem. It's actually a solution because it's being addressed. And the first one, also, I think that it's on the way. So I guess the second one, the issue is the change management. Because at the end of the day, we always say, oh, we don't have the technology, and then we have the technology. And then we say, oh, we don't have the law, and when we have the law. But then we still see that, although I would not agree with you that, the buy-in is particularly slow. I mean, one has to be realistic because we are talking about tens of thousands of different commercial entities involved in this, at least at the core, because at the end of the day, it's basically every trader, and of course, some use cases are easier to tackle than others, but at the end of the day, it comes down, yes, to decision makers, but also to a lot of capacity building at the operational level. And so one has to have the right mix, of making sustainable choices, wise choices, but at the same time accompanying that so that there will not be a failure or a rejection. And the problem is that every player counts, every involved trader counts, but one has to reach a certain math. Now, I think Bertrand said that in China, for at least in certain fields, you have like already 30% of buy-in, which is wonderful. But when in China you had some piloting and you have also some clear policy direction, and this is a priority. So there is a strong encouragement from government to do that. I really believe that there is a need for that, and maybe more can be done at the individual level and thinking how to train and prepare all the people involved to deal with that. At the same time, I also think that there is a huge incentive now. It's not just a matter of polycrisis, but I think that as a matter of fact, it's completely impossible to manage in a sustainable and compliant manner any cross-border supply chain. So it has to be digitalized, because if it's not with a reliable electronic information, it cannot be done. I don't think it can be done seriously on paper anymore. So we will have a huge incentive to do that. That will not come from the EBL itself, for instance, but it will come, say, from the fact that duties and tariffs change every couple of days, and you don't know anymore what is coming from where and what, and penalty is heavy.
So actually, this change can potentially get us through the so-called polycrisis, but it is a change management piece that needs to be that needs to be addressed. Bertrand, would you say we have a fear of failure culturally within our industry, i.e., sticking our head above the parapet, saying, let's do this differently, and if we fail, it's okay?
I don't think that's a problem. To be honest, right? I think everybody is very willing to try. So in 2026, nobody will say, "Are you crazy going digital? I prefer paper." Like nobody will say that. In all fairness. Plus, as Luca rightly pointed out, there's so much crisis, so many things. Everybody naturally say we need technology to help us stay abreast of the risk and tackle the risk. Nobody say, "I want to stay with paper."
Hey, enjoying this podcast? Hit that follow button for more. Done? Let's get back to it.
But the reality, I think, when you think about it, is the paper was sort of a symptom of a way to handle things that has been existing for many years. And I think what's lacking today potentially is a sort of a vision to explain to everyone, if we switch to EBL or digital document, what can you do differently today that you cannot do in the past? Otherwise, all they're saying is, I have this process today, I have CWA bill, I have a origin bill of lading, have EBL, just adding a new process for me. And as long as not everybody's using EBL, I just have more, it's more complex. So one thing that we try to do for the last 2 years is to try to create sort of a vision besides the incentive. But if you adopt EBL or digital document, what does that really mean for you, right? And I'd like to use a metaphor that I think is quite apt in this. And please let me know if you agree with this or not. So for those who are interested in the history of trade, in 1956, there was a big revolution that happened, and it's the beginning of containerization. So what is containerization? So before containerization, what you have is people have to move goods. They first have to load on the cargo hold of the ship, right? And then once the ship arrives on the destination, they have to take it away from the cargo hold, put that in the yard somewhere, and then put down trucks. So the operation was very, very expensive. The terminal side was very cheap on the shipping side, but on at sea, but on the terminal was very, very expensive. And the container changed that in the sense that you put everything in the box, you move the box, and then you create a system where everything goes really, really fast. It's very efficient. To some degree, I would argue today that it's super easy to move cargo, but it's actually really, really hard to move data, right? And the reason for that is very simple. Inherently in this industry, it's all about keeping some information away from your suppliers, right? I want to know something, but I don't want them to know, because my value adds as a middleman is to control that information. And therefore, there's an incentive, even as we digitize, to hide stuff, right? I give you some information, I don't give you all the information. And then because of that, people just keep re-entering information. So you take the information PDF up, I take a PDF, I re-enter another system, send to you. So we waste so much time and so much energy just doing this data entry. So I argue that in the yesteryear you have a longshoreman moving cargo. Today you have a bunch of white collar people in the obviously the AC room, but just entering information in Excel sheet, reading from an email, entering Excel sheet. And that's really what's happening today. However, if you switch everything to electronic documents, right? What I would like to argue for is the electronic bill of lading, you can consider as sort of a data container, where not that you put more information in the electronic bill of lading, but electronic bill of lading is associated with every single shipment. You can start to associate information to it. And the information can be then trusted. You can put it on blockchain. You can share to the right people. And that's the real unlock to potentially connect logistic, finance, compliance. And as Luca was saying, right, today, in this day and age when so much uncertainty happened, and today, like, let's say, customs keeps changing, customs duty keeps changing, you need to verify a way to prove where your goods come from. So the vision is not to say switch from paper to electronic bill of lading to pardon my French, just give it off paper, because nobody cares. It's actually how this will enable you to do business in a manner that's manageable. Otherwise, you're going to die try to manage this uncertainty. It's just not doable. So I think that is a vision we want to push people towards, instead of saying, hey, you have to do this, but more, this is the only way for you to achieve risk management to handle your business in the current environment. I think that's probably a stronger, better way to communicate what people should do for digital documents.
Thank you. So I guess just on the control piece, Luca, how does the idea of control replace physical possession in a digital environment?
Control has become a buzzword in the legal field recently, and with different similar but different notions in different contexts. In the MLETR, control is quite simple. It is a factual notion, just like possession is a factual notion. So the way control is exercised has to do with the features of the system that is used to manage the electronic transfer record. Control is, is one of the elements to achieve a functional equivalent between a transferable document and instrument and electronic transfer records. The other ones being singularity, that is to say, the ability to identify that record as the relevant record, and then integrity, which is the ability to record all the relevant events in the life cycle of that specific. Cannot say to record the events in the life cycle of the record. So I would say to keep track of all the relevant events in the life cycle of the electronic document. Probably that would be a way to avoid saying record too many times. But as I said, control, and I think that now we have good ways of controlling things. But what I would like to stress, what is really important and what has been the key to the success of MLETR is that MLETR does not change anything in existing law. And there have been a couple of instances with new legislation on digital assets where there has been the need to clarify that whatever is adopted for digital assets should keep electronic transfer records outside. Because also from a private law perspective, not necessarily regulation, but from a private law perspective, there is no law for digital assets. And when I say digital assets, most people think about crypto and the like. And so there is the need to have some rules, and these rules may be very fit for this type of assets, but they are definitely not the rules you want to have when you deal, for instance, with electronic bills of lading. When you deal with electronic bills of lading, you want to use the Hague-Visby rules or whatever you're using, and a couple of additional provisions taken from MLETR. So just to say that control is dangerous in the sense that one has to be very clear on what control is in the different contexts. And in this context, it is a factual factual condition. So someone has control, but it can be doesn't have. It has to be exclusive in the sense that the people in control only they can control, but it doesn't have to be to a single person. It can be shared.
Thanks, Luca. Bertrand, isn't the goal here, and I'll purposely be a bit controversial here, isn't the goal to make networks or organizations like GSBN almost redundant? You don't need the likes of GSBN to be present if all of this, you've got the control, you've got the enabling laws, you've got truly digital trade, and you can move data in a controlled way, irrespective of who you are within the network.
Sure. So actually, I'll take your question from two perspectives, right? So one is a control, which is the kind of the implementation, the technology aspect. The second one, the legal meaning, right, of control and MLETR. So I guess the question is also about interoperability, right? So you have one solution, it's a ICE Cargo Docs, IQX, the thing I mentioned earlier. They both have their way of handling control. They have their own rule book. They have the infrastructure. They have the contract with the customer. Now, when we approach interoperability, the first question we're asking is, what are we trying to solve? Is it a technical problem? Is it a legal problem? And actually, the reality we realize very quickly is the technology sit aside. It's not about technology, it's about the lawyers. So first, we need to understand what legal thing we try to solve. Because fundamentally, bill of lading is a legal document. There's a legal meaning to it. When you talk about interoperability, it's not about technology, it's about legal. And then when we drill down really into it, and that to be, I cannot take credit for it. It's mostly Marina Kominos, who's the co-head of ICE, who basically a huge contributor, help us think about this. So this is really her thoughts, right? I'm putting words in her mouth right now. But the idea is, if you want to solve this problem, it's fundamentally a legal thing you need to solve. And the idea is, first, how can we align the language between two different solutions? Because they have different rule book. It's as if one is speaking Chinese, the other one speaking English or Greek and French, whatever, right? So they have different concept, different ideas. If you follow the rule book, it's impossible. It's always very extremely hard to align them. However, if you use MLETR as a jump off point, a single legal concept or legal foundation to build interoperability, then it's very easy to do, right? Just go and synchronize an MLETR concept, which are the local law. So UK law, Singapore law, bunch of law that today is MLETR, right? So if you synchronize this, you solve the legal language. Then the next question you ask is the control, right? So, and that's potentially where a platform like GSPN has a role to play. Because if you think about this, very simple, right? So you have two solutions between ICE and IQX, they're exchanging a bill of lading, meaning right now, the trader is on the ICE. I want to send it to a trader that's on IQX. Okay, so if let's say there's no one in the middle to observe the control, it's a debate between these two, right? ICE can say, I send it to you. IQX say, well, I never received it. Or IQX, I received this. I didn't send it to you. How do they come to a common agreement what happened? More importantly, if it's electronic, system fail, network goes down, right? It's maybe very improbable, it can still happen. And in that situation, at any point of time stamp, you need to be able to tell which solution is today in control of the bill of lading, right? That's actually the thing which I saw. So when you use someone in the middle, what we call the control tracking registry, the word control is in it, the CTR is very important because the role of CTR is just to establish at any point of time which EBR solution is in control of the documents. And if you can establish that, then the liability transfer between the solution, between the customer is very, very easy. It's very transparent. At any point of time, you know who effectively is carrying the risk, who's actually helping facilitate this trade. So both the MLETR to use a synchronization layer for the legal language, plus a CTR in the middle to say who's, basically it's like an air traffic control, right? Is it you? Is it this guy? And then that will resolve a lot of the questions that we have. So that's why this approach is both very pragmatic. It's not about technology. It's about the legal document. It's also let's try to simplify the thing as much as we can, such that this is very easy to implement, very easy to understand, and very easy for banks, even banks, to adopt, to understand what are the risks they're taking and what's changed if you do interoperable EPR.
Was that the consequence? This is for either of you to answer, actually. Was that an unintended consequence of the creation of MLETR, the need to have a kind of additional technological sync layer between various EBL platforms? Because in my head, surely that just makes things even more complicated. Perhaps, Luca, can I ask you to take this first?
I cannot say unintended, but maybe it's a natural consequence of the fact that we are taking digital trade more seriously, and that there has been incremental and steady progress. 30 years ago, the first model law of UNCITRAL in this field was adopted, the model law on electronic commerce, which, by the way, is not about electronic commerce, because terminology changed. And there you have a first provision on electronic signatures. But they were looking at electronic signatures mostly as a tool to satisfy the signature requirement that you have in the law. In common law, you have from the statutes of fraud, and in civil law, you have it even more. And then, because partly of PKI, they realized that the signature could also provide the data quality assurance, but there was no real awareness of the difference between a signature as a contract law form requirement and of a signature as what today we call a trust service. And we did a lot of work on that in the last 30 years, partly at UNCITRAL, partly elsewhere for the trust services. The reference text is the European Union EIDAS regulation, for instance, but of course there can be other approaches. And nowadays, I think it is really important to separate clearly two, if not three things. One is the validity of the document, on paper or electronic, but document has some requirements for validity, which is in the law, which is in a treaty. The second is the data quality assurance. The document can be valid, but for instance, there is no reliability of the methods used for its issuance in circulation. So, we had even a case from Colombia. Someone took a screenshot of what could have been an electronic bill of exchange or something like that. And I mean, maybe all the information was there, the amount, the parties, but there is absolutely no assurance that it has been accepted by the relevant people. So, it can be made up with Photoshop as far as we know. And the third part, which is the part which also we need to think of, and this is what is a bit missing, is that you have a number of features like automation, like also dynamic information, and more generally information generated from oracles and so on and so forth, that are features that are unique to the electronic form. And in order to go from digitalization to digital transformation, yes, one has to rethink business processes, but has also to think, how can I solve my day-to-day problem by incorporating in a reliable way information that is already existing in the real world. And this means, for instance, to be able to monitor and trace the whole supply chain end to end, but also with the additional information like compliance with, say, ESG standards or other standards, and everything has to be embedded. So it's very complex, of course, but it's needed. So I think there are three at this point. I think there are three different aspects which are complementary, but one has to really break them down.
Bertrand, what of these three concepts do you think we need to give the most resource to get to where we want to get to by 2030? Is it around understanding the validity of the document and also, I guess, the implementation of MLETR or equivalent in various markets around the world? Is it the data quality assurance and, perhaps some networks or some organizations ensuring the quality of that data is passable, or is it around ensuring the information is unique to the electronic format?
Actually, neither of three. I think they're all actually pretty solved. Like it's just a matter of education. MLETR is come. I mean, the train has left the station. Literally, you have to be crazy to say I don't want that MLETR, so that's not a problem. The trusted document, I actually think it's pretty easy if you use a blockchain, and most solutions today are using blockchain, so that's not a problem. The second one, the data quality, to some degree, I would say, as the shipping line, the carriers are pushing for it, increasingly it's going to come from standardized data. So that, again, is not a problem. I actually remain, for me, the main point is still about you need to sell to the end user a vision of why adopting EBL or trade document will change their life. And maybe here, let me make it more clear what I mean by that. In most corporations, when you have to adopt document, it's not a single person making the decision. You need to commit a couple folks, right? So first is the folks who are the procurement department who deal with the shipping line. They may actually not even know about this because they just care about the rates and the space allocation. There's someone in operation, or even not them, there's someone they outsource to freight forwarder who knows about documents. And they may say, oh, actually, you should use EBL or not. Then there's someone in the finance department, the CFO. He probably doesn't understand about this shipping, this documentation, because that's not his job. His job is to say, I control the coins, right? And before him, if they suddenly adopt EBL, electronic document, maybe they can get financing faster, better, they can get better rates. So that's the language he understands. But unfortunately, when a shipping line trying to push EBL adoption, they're not talking to the CFO, right? They're talking to the wrong person. So to me, I think the biggest problem to solve goes back to the same things, education, explain to all folks involved in trade that this is not just about document digitalization, this has a direct meaning to your bottom line. You will change your financing rate. You will change availability to trade finance. You will change your ability to conduct trade. That's the reason you should adopt it, not because to get rid of paper. Because a lot of people like, my house is burning right now. It's like I have no time to do this trade digitalization science project you're asking me to, right? And I think that is we need to speak the right language to the right person. And I think that's still something that we're not as good as I would like us to be, including GST.
So that's your big misconception really around trade digitalization that you think the industry really needs to kind of let go of or rather own in terms of benefits to the bottom line between now and 2030.
It's not about putting a PDF on the blockchain. Digitalization is not about putting a PDF on the blockchain to create token. It's not about this. It's about, as a BCO, as a trader, you have problem. What does this solve as a problem for you? Well, as Luca mentioned, right, traceability, ESG, compliance with the customs, it's about getting financing. All this can be resolved, can be made better if you decide in your contract with your supplier to say, let's use electronic bill of lading. Because today they don't even know this option exists. They don't even know why it matters to them.
Luca, do you agree? And what takeaway do you want to leave with a different audience, the policymakers or the practitioners in the room listening to this podcast?
I fully agree. And I wanted to leave with an example that we heard a couple of days ago in a colloquium here from New Zealand with a very large company that discussed for a few years and finally managed to get permission to submit automated export declarations. Now, export declarations, they don't bring revenue, so they're not as critical as import declarations. And they have a very significant chance of having mistakes when done manually. And if done automatically, based on information that can come, for instance, from a bill of lading, they have zero stake, of course. And it took them 3 years to convince the customs authority of New Zealand, which is quite open and forward-thinking. So that actually an automated system could pass the standard of a fit and proper person, which is in general legislation. But why I'm mentioning that is because now they submitted, I don't know, it's like 40,000, something like that, export declarations without a single mistake. And so now it's tested. But people maybe in the beginning don't think that they should go for EBLs because that would save them a huge amount of time and money and penalties in export declarations. But actually, it all comes together. So the EBL may not be absolutely necessary for the purpose of the EBL, but may be absolutely necessary for some other thing which comes from the EBL. So, you have to think of it holistically. And I know that these are difficult times, so people are not ready to think in that broad way, but it's really the way forward.
Luca, Bertrand, thank you very much. And I think what's important here is really looking at solutions from different perspectives and thinking about why you're doing them, not just because of your job or your direct industry, but perhaps the savings it could make, the unintended or intended consequences to drive this forward. Education ultimately is at the heart of this, and continued awareness of the products, the platforms, and the changes that are happening at quite an enormous pace. Highly recommend purchasing Luca Castellani's book. We'll publish a link alongside this podcast. That was Bertrand Chen at GSBN and Luca Castellani, author of his latest book. Luca, Bertrand, thank you very much for joining us on this podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
And don't forget to follow Trade Treasury Payments on your favorite podcast platform.
Thanks for listening.